This is AM Joy, July 22nd, 2018.
Really a complete joke, and it only continues. It's just really sad.
Joining me now is Congressman Ted Lieu, Democrat from California, Natasha Bertrand, staff writer for The Atlantic, Trita Parsi, president of the National Iranian American Council, and E.J. Dionne, columnist at The Washington Post. And Congressman, I'll start with you. This was an extraordinary step for the FBI to release a redacted version of that FISA warrant. Going through that warrant, what does it tell you about the government's effort to surveil Carter Page?
Thank you, Jerry, for your question. It shows that there was overwhelming evidence to have probable cause to do surveillance on Carter Page. The application itself was over 400 pages. There were multiple sources in that application. It showed that Carter Page had a history of interactions with Russian intelligence officers, that Russia interfered in America's elections, and that Carter Page may have been conspiring with the Russians. It would have been a dereliction of duty for our FBI not to have sought a surveillance warrant on Carter Page.
So then, Congressman, what are we to now make of Devin Nunes, who has close ties to the Trump campaign, who has been a defender, really a vehement defender of Donald Trump, almost no matter what we've heard come out of the Mueller investigation, who was supposed to be recused from the investigation because he was on the transition, but who led a partisan effort on the House Intelligence Committee as a lead member of the Gang of Eight to put out a narrative that there was nothing to. There was no basis for the FISA warrant. What do we make now of that majority report that came out of House Intelligence?
Devin Nunes has admitted publicly he did not read the source documents for his infamous Nunes memo. So he basically wrote this entire memo to mislead the American public without ever having read this FISA application. And now we know that this FISA application contradicts the Republican narrative. And in addition, what we have here is a FBI and Department of Justice working in a nonpartisan, professional manner, trying to deal with Russian interference in our elections. And the Mueller investigation needs to continue without any more political interference.
Natasha Bertrand, I realize it's early on a Sunday morning, but I'm wondering if you're starting to hear any reaction from Republicans who, again, the partisan members, the Republican majority on the House Intelligence Committee, all signed on to a memo that is the opposite of what we're reading in this actual warrant application. It shows Christopher Steele was not the only source, that there was a genuine belief among the government officials who achieved this warrant or who went for this warrant, that Carter Page really was acting as an agent of Russia. How are Republicans responding to that?
Well, they're not responding yet, of course, and I think that honestly it is Republican Representative Trey Gowdy who is going to have a lot to answer for this, because of course he was the one who actually read the FISA warrant itself. Nunes was briefed on it. He never actually saw the underlying source materials, as the congressman just said, but Trey Gowdy did, and Trey Gowdy of course signed on to this memo and he endorsed it, and he did say that there was reason to believe that the FBI had not been forthcoming with the FISA court about the fact that Chris Steele had potential biases, that he was hired by partisan operatives on the Democratic National Committee in order to do opposition research on Trump. Now we know that, of course, the FBI devoted nearly a page to disclosing Steele's potential biases of that kind. So it's going to be Gowdy who, will have to answer for this. We have not heard them come out and say so far, how they are going to spin this, because of course anyone who reads the FISA warrant can see in plain black and white that the Nunes memo was nothing but was everything. I mean, it was very misleading. It was just a complete partisan show in order to bolster this narrative that the FBI improperly surveilled the Trump campaign, which of course also makes no sense, because the surveillance of Carter Page did not actually begin until after he left the campaign, until about a month after he'd already left the campaign. So the whole thing just really is nonsensical.
And E.J. Dionne, here is the declassified FISA warrant for those who are watching. You can see there are lots of redactions on it. On the first page of it, right at the top, E.J., it's dated, this application is dated 10 blacked out 2016, meaning that this was a warrant application that took place before the United States election, before the election in 2016. So the FBI may have been late to the game. We're going to talk with the former CIA director. They were late to the game in believing that this effort by Russia was on behalf of Donald Trump, but they certainly were investigating members of the Trump campaign. What do you make of this disclosure and how it may alter the narrative Republicans are trying to put out about the investigation of Russia's interference in our election?
Well, I think it's really striking that Robert Mueller and the FBI and Justice have been under a relentless attack from President Trump and the Republicans. They are clearly willing to make things up in order to further their narrative. And for a long time, they were relatively quiet. They didn't think it was their job to jump into the public debate as a sparring partner. And what they did is they waited and waited, and then suddenly they came out with really powerful information that kind of blows all the other arguments out of the water. First were those indictments, which came right before Trump's meeting with Putin. And the fact that those indictments came out right before the meeting put everything Trump said in a remarkable light. He was forced to pick between Putin and our intelligence services, and he essentially picked Putin and then had to clean it up in the back. And now they are putting out this warrant, which clearly shows that there was very good reason to put Carter Page under surveillance, that A, they had been truthful about what they knew about Steele, but also that it was based on other sources. So I think they are just slowly but methodically building up a case that is going to be harder and harder for Trump to deny, not only in court or in the Congress, but to public opinion.
And, Trina Parsi, just looking at this as a foreign policy analyst, you have the Trump administration trying to cast doubt on everything the U.S. intelligence services have done, getting out of the Iran deal, saying that was a terrible deal, poorly put together, going in, claiming they can negotiate a peace with North Korea better than the Obama administration did. We now have evidence that the Obama administration, at least even if they were pretty late in the campaign game, were still attempting to thwart Russia's attempts to interfere in our election. What do you make of how this winds up getting read as it pings around the world, that it turns out that, yeah, there was a good faith belief, reason to believe that there was someone who was essentially a spy for a foreign government, at least who was very closely associated with the Trump campaign?
Well, one of the first things you're going to see is that the other intelligence services around the world that the United States collaborates closely with and whose assistance and information it oftentimes is in need of are not going to be as forthcoming with the information any longer, because they simply cannot have confidence in how this intelligence is going to be used and how the president might be sharing it with others without real cause. Moreover, when it comes to the aftermath of Trump, I am quite worried that a lot of countries around the world that otherwise have really invested in their relationship as a strategic relationship with the United States are now going to feel that they need to have a very strong plan B, because what has happened here with the Trump administration is going to cause them to think that it might be able to happen again. And next time around, they don't want to be as vulnerable as they have been this time by being so dependent on the United States. And ultimately, that is really in the favor of other states, other major powers, such as Russia.
Well, Congressman Ted Lieu, then I'll throw that back to you. What will the United States Congress do about what Trina just described as a diminution of American influence around the world, including the ability to cooperate with foreign intelligence services? Because how do you trust an administration that was putting out real disinformation with the help of members of Congress?
Jory, I sit on the House Judiciary Committee controlled by Republicans, and my answer is it's actually worse than nothing. So last week, in the midst of all this, we had a classified briefing on, wait for this, Hillary Clinton's emails. So that's where the House Republicans are. They're completely out of touch with the actual reality. And if American people want to change it, they have a chance this November to change the makeup of Congress.
Natasha, is that what we're going to see? Republicans continuing to deny the reality that is now 400 and some odd pages visible to the American people and attempt to pivot back to Hillary Clinton?
Well, it seems to be working. I mean, they have gone along with Trump's base, essentially, who is increasingly, they increasingly approve of the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. They approve of the way that the president handled his meeting with Putin in Helsinki. So if the base is pushing the Republican Party in one direction, as we've seen them doing for the last year and a half, then it seems like the Republicans will continue to put out these narratives. I mean, just this morning we saw that the president is still saying that the FBI illegally surveilled his campaign, which of course is not true, because the surveillance began on Carter Page after he had already left the campaign. But it seems like, especially on Fox News, watching Fox News this morning, these narratives are still being put out there, even though they have been proven false. And that is something I think we will continue to see as the Mueller investigation goes on. And once all the facts are out there, then that is going to be an opportunity for the American people to see in black and white what has been discovered. But until then, this manipulation of facts, this, ability to kind of spin it the way that they want to, and with the president leading the way, I think it's going to continue. I mean, we already saw just last week, the GOP rejected 2 non-binding proposals to essentially back the intelligence community after Trump disparaged them on the world stage, and to support the Mueller investigation. 2 very, very kind of, seemingly innocuous things that the Republicans just would not sign on to. And the question is why? And I think that it will remain to be seen whether or not that position begins to shift.
Well, the why, E.J. Dion, is exactly what Natasha just mentioned. The ABC Washington poll that's out this morning showing that approval of the way that Trump handled Helsinki, which has been universally deemed a disaster. Among Republicans, 66% said they think he did just fine, as opposed to only 8% of Democrats and 33% of independents who feel that way. And in this poll, an extraordinary 15% said that Trump was not kind enough to Vladimir Putin, that he didn't go far enough in supporting Putin.
Joe, you read my mind because I wanted to bring up those numbers. What Natasha said about the Republicans is true, although it's really striking that only 56% of Republicans approved his handling of that episode. That's really low compared to other numbers. But the other striking thing is not only that it was 50-33 disapprove, but that people who felt this strongly, the strong disapprovers, outnumbered the strong approvers by 2 to 1. That tells us where the energy is in the public argument. The energy is now much more anti-Trump. Trump is wearing down some of his supporters, and that could well play into the election. And as I say, 15%, well, you can probably get 15% of us to say yes to all kinds of questions.
Yeah, unfortunately. Trina Parsi, before we go, I know that there are other things going on besides this morning. I know when I was speaking with you before you came on, the Trump administration is also still flogging issues about Iran. If you could just give us an update on that before we go.
Well, just as we're talking about Russian meddling in the United States, the Reuters just ran a piece yesterday revealing what many people had already seen, is that the Trump administration is now actively fomenting unrest inside of Iran. Pompeo is going to give a speech later this evening to the Iranian-American community, and it's starting to look very much like what it did in the early phases of the Iraq War, in which the Bush administration paraded Iraqi Americans on TV, essentially begging to get bombed and trying to give the impression that the Iraqi community supported the very belligerent approach of the Bush administration. We're seeing a repeat of that being done right now by Pompeo.
And we still haven't gotten conclusions on what happened with the interference on our election in 2016, and you're already starting to see us spoiling for more conflict around the world. Congressman Ted Lieu, Natasha Bertrand, Trina Parsi, E.J. Dion, thank you all. Have a wonderful Sunday.
And you too, Joy.
Thank you. And up next, the NRA's love affair with Russia. Stay with us.